Hi, it's Dean Zierfoss speaking to you from my basement. Today I want to talk to you about when you should go visit law schools. I have a strong opinion about this, like I do about so many other things, and my opinion is one and done. You should only visit law schools one time, assuming your money and time are finite, and you should do it after you're admitted. Here's why. First of all, why go visit at all? The big reason is to gather information. 4 big areas of information you can gather. One is questions about the application process. Kind of information I'm giving you here, you can ask people in an admissions office. 2 is just gathering information that's school specific. You know, do you have this kind of clinic? How many people do you send to this city? That sort of thing. 3, you'll get some vibe of the school, like the people who work there, by your interactions with the admissions office. And 4, you will get a good sense of the campus and the area. For those first 3 types of information, you can get all that information by emailing or calling the school or having a Zoom conference. And all the law schools that I know of are willing to do that for prospective applicants. So, you know, you can ask your admission-specific questions, you can ask your school-specific questions, and you can get a sense of what kind of person are you dealing with, how kind are they, how responsive are they, how informed are they. You shouldn't make much of a decision based on an admissions office at a school, but it'll tell you a little something. It's not nothing, and you can definitely glean all that based on non-in-person interactions. You can't get much of a sense of the campus and the area, it's true, and those are extremely important for deciding where to attend law school. But they're not so important for deciding whether to apply. The decision to apply is a much smaller investment in any possible way than the decision where to attend. So, you know, you can put that to the side for a little while and return to that once you know what schools you're actually choosing among. The other reason people sometimes want to visit a school before they've been admitted is to make an impression, to get that school knowing you, let them know that you're interested in them, and sort of start this relationship developing process. That is a big part of the admissions process for many undergraduate institutions, especially liberal arts schools in particular, I'd say, because they're smaller. That's just, they collect information about whether you went to college fairs, and they collect information about whether you come visit and whether you called the office and whether you responded to inquiries and that sort of thing. They gather all that in their customer relationship management databases and make decisions about whether to admit you based on how interested you are. To my knowledge, that is just not a factor in law school admissions. It may be for some schools. That is definitely an area where I can't speak to the entire population of all law schools. But as a general matter, it isn't something that, certainly that Michigan does, or the schools that I am most familiar with engage in. So you really don't have to worry about that. I suppose it's possible, if you went to visit and made an amazing impression or a really terrible impression, that might be something a school would keep track of. But for the most part, most people, it's just not going to be any weight one way or another. So now, let's get to the meat of why I say don't visit until after you have been admitted. First of all, you're going to limit the number of schools you go to. You probably won't be admitted to every single school that you are considering. Some of them you won't apply to at all, and only a few people in this world get admitted to every single school they apply to. So you can save yourself a little energy and a little time and a little money by waiting till you'll see what your exact range of choices are. But the real reason, I think, is that you get to ask much tougher questions and be much more critical in your receiving of the information you get in response. So let's say one of the big considerations for you is that you think you want to work in a particular kind of field in a particular city. And the data you can see about the school you're considering that you've been admitted to doesn't look like they do a lot of that. If you are just meeting them when you are a supplicant, before you have applied or before you've been admitted, you're probably not going to push them real hard on their answers. You'll ask them in some general way and they'll answer in some general way, and that will be that. if you're really making a decision about like school A or school B, and you've got this set of questions for school A, you can keep following up. You can say, well, I don't really understand what you'll do for me if that's my goal, and how you'll make this possible for me if that's my goal. And can you tell me whether you'd put me in touch with alumni? Blah, 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 blah. All this sort of stuff. Plus, if you're admitted, you're going to see a much bigger part of the school. You know, I talked about getting a sense of the vibe of the place and not putting too much weight on the admissions office. That is true. But if you're visiting after you've been admitted, you're going to get introduced to people in the career planning office. You might meet faculty. You're going to meet people from all corners of the place. And you're going to get exposed to a lot of students too, current students, some of whom will be admissions office volunteers, some of whom will just be random people. And, you know, if you talk to 40 people on a school visit versus 4, you're just going to get a much wider range of information, and it's going to be just so much more useful. And like I say, you're going to have the confidence to ask the questions that you really care about and not take vague promises for an answer if you don't want to. So that's about all I have to say about that. And now it is time for our word usage / grammar segment. I want to talk today about the word only. I was inspired to this topic by looking at a Twitter thread by a Twitter persona. I don't know, what do we call that? By a tweeter. The account is @DataAndPolitics. I think it's a really worthwhile follow if you are interested. But there was a thread on there about Harvard and Radcliffe. And I noticed it because I went to a women's college, so I was interested in seeing the Harvard / Radcliffe history. And there were 2 tweets in particular that jumped out at me. One was, Radcliffe women were only allowed to enter Harvard's main library in 1967. And the other tweet was, Radcliffe women were only awarded Harvard degrees in 1963. Now, as tweets, those are fine. Like, you get the point. But I was struck by the use of the word only in both of those tweets because it's misplaced. So the first one, it says Radcliffe women were only allowed to enter Harvard's main library in 1967, which makes it sound like they weren't allowed in 1967. The only thing they were allowed to do was enter Harvard's main library. They weren't allowed to do anything else. The other sentence was Radcliffe women were only awarded Harvard degrees in 1963. That makes it sound, again, like in 1963, one thing happened to Radcliffe women, and it was that they were awarded Harvard degrees. And that has to do with the way you put the word only in the sentence. Now, I am going to, for the first time, refer to an outside source, Brian Garner, on modern legal usage, because he says it so well, and I couldn't say it any better. So I'm going to quote from what he says about the word only, if I can just find, here it is. Only is perhaps the most frequently misplaced of all English words. Its best placement is precisely before the words intended to be limited. The more words separating only from its correct position, the more awkward the sentence, and such a separation can lead to ambiguities. So in the 2 tweets I was talking about, you can fiddle with the place that you find the word only, make it clear that you're trying to emphasize that it was only as recently as 1967 and 1963 that these things happen, and you will make it clearer and make your point a little more forcefully. So think about where you're using onlys in a sentence. I want to point out, I only started thinking about that when I clerked for a judge who was really obsessed with it. I had been writing for many years before I clerked for that judge, and I had never really put a lot of thought into this. So as with all these grammar tips, I know it sounds like I'm being really pedantic, but these are almost all of them coming from mistakes that I have made. Okay, that's all I got today. Thank you so much for listening. Really glad you are, taking this in. Would love to hear your feedback, comments, whatever you got, questions in the comments below. Fire away, or send us an email to law.jd.admissions@umich.edu and put vlog in the subject line. And you might want to check out my blog, and there's a link below if you are interested in the content that you've heard today. Finally, thank you as always, to the amazing Dustin Johnston, who is a profile in patience. Wherever you go, go blue.